The blinding headlights glaring in my rearview mirror were the last thing I remember before the world flipped upside down. I am Riley Crawford, 28 years old. I never thought my own brother would stand on the roadside and watch me crash, then drive away without lifting a finger to help. It was after midnight on I-190, outside Buffalo snow, falling so heavy it swallowed the headlights. I was heading home in my black SUV when I reached the sharp curve near the river. I slammed the brake pedal, nothing. The pedal sank to the floor. The car surged forward instead of slowing, smashed through the guardrail, and tumbled down the steep embankment. Glass shattered, metal screamed, and I kept yelling until the airbag exploded and knocked me out cold. When my eyes fluttered open again, I was in the ICU head, throbbing ribs aching, every inch of me bruised. The heart monitor beeped steadily beside me. I scanned the sterile room. No visitors, no cards, no familiar faces. The young nurse checking my IV drip hesitated before telling me the truth. No one had arrived with me. Whoever brought me here dropped my purse at the front desk and vanished. No insurance details, no emergency contact, nothing. I was completely alone. I asked to borrow her tablet since my phone was gone. Logged into my email. Security alerts from the family trust poured in. 3 urgent requests to liquidate $2.8 million submitted just 8 hours after the crash, while I was still unconscious in the ravine bleeding out in the snow. The timestamps hit like a second impact. 3 days dragged by. No calls, no texts, no sign of my brother. Then he strolled into the hospital lobby wearing a crisp new coat, looking almost worried, and leaned casually over the reception desk. "Has my younger sister still not been discharged yet?" he asked, voice smooth, practiced concern. The nurse looked straight at him, paused just long enough to let the silence stretch, then answered with one calm sentence that wiped every trace of color from his face and froze him where he stood. "Hit the subscribe button and ring the bell right now so you don't miss the exact words that shattered his perfect lie." I couldn't stay in that hospital bed another second. The walls felt like they were closing in, and every beep of the monitor reminded me how close I'd come to never waking up at all. The nurse had just left to check on another patient, so I grabbed her tablet again and called Mr. Brian Russell. He picked up on the second ring. I kept my voice low and urgent. "It wasn't an accident. Someone tampered with the brakes. I need to get out tonight before they realize I'm conscious." He didn't hesitate. "I'm already in the parking lot. Give me 10 minutes. True to his word, he arrived with paperwork marked for immediate discharge against medical advice, convinced the night supervisor this was a family privacy issue that couldn't wait until morning. I changed into plain clothes he'd brought, kept my head down, and we walked out past the reception desk like I was just another visitor heading home late. Zoe was idling at the curb in her Jeep, windows fogged from the heater running full blast. She didn't ask questions. She just reached over, squeezed my shoulder once, and pulled away smoothly into the snowy night. The drive to her apartment overlooking Lake Erie felt endless, but the silence between us was the kind that didn't need filling. Once inside her place, doors locked and blinds drawn, she went straight to a drawer and pulled out 2 compact security cameras she'd picked up that afternoon. "You're not stepping foot back in that house alone," she said, "but we can see everything they do." I agreed without argument. We waited until the streets were empty, then drove to the family home 2 blocks away and parked out of sight. Using the spare key I still kept on my chain, we slipped in through the side entrance. The house smelled the same faint wood polish and old books, but it felt foreign now, like it belonged to someone else. I positioned one camera on the living room bookshelf angled to catch the hallway and foyer, and hid the second in the home office between thick law volumes on the top shelf lens aimed directly at the wall safe. Everything streamed to a secure cloud account only Mr. Russell and I controlled. We were back at Zoe's within 30 minutes, laptop open on the kitchen table. The feed stayed dark and still for almost an hour. Then the front door flew open with a bang. Logan strode in, first coat dusted with fresh snow, breathing hard like he'd run from the car. Samantha followed close behind, arms wrapped tight around herself, eyes darting everywhere. She looked smaller than I remembered, almost reluctant. Logan didn't pause. He headed straight for the office, punched the old safe code. Red light. He tried again, cursing under his breath. Nothing. I'd reset it 2 nights before the crash after catching him lingering too long near the trust files. Samantha hovered in the doorway. "What's the plan now?" she whispered. Logan yanked his phone out, dialed and switched to speaker. "We need her signature or we're stuck," he said to whoever was on the line. The voice that answered was rough, impatient, someone I didn't recognize. Logan cut in quickly. "Give me 3 more days, she's not waking up yet, but I'll handle it." He ended the call, turned to Samantha. "If she doesn't wake up soon, we're done. The creditors won't wait another week." Samantha swallowed visibly but didn't push back. They left the safe door ajar, lights off, and walked out the front door, clicking shut behind them. I sat frozen in front of the screen long after the feed went still again. That phone call in the hallway, those quiet words about handling it, the way Samantha just stood there. It all clicked into place like pieces of a lock I hadn't wanted to open. Betrayal doesn't always announce itself with screams or crashes. Sometimes it starts with hushed conversations in empty corridors with people you've known your whole life, deciding your survival is inconvenient. Right then, I understood how deeply it can cut when the first warning is nothing more than a voice you weren't meant to hear. And I couldn't stop wondering how many others have caught the same kind of whisper in their own family and tried to convince themselves it was nothing. The next morning, the doorbell rang like someone was trying to break it down. I was at Zoe's kitchen island, staring into a half-empty mug of tea, when the pounding started, sharp, furious knocks that echoed through the apartment. Zoe shot me a quick glance, walked to the door, peered through the peephole, then opened it just a crack. Logan shoved past her without a word, barreling into the living room. Coat still zipped, face flushed from the cold, and something darker. "How did you find me?" I asked, setting the mug down carefully. He held up his phone screen, glowing. "The family location app. The one we've shared since Dad set it up. You never logged out after that takeout order last night." His voice was tight, almost triumphant, like catching me was proof of something. He didn't ask about my head, didn't glance at the fading bruises or the way I still moved slowly. Instead, he stepped closer, eyes scanning the room, as if expecting to find evidence of my betrayal. "I've been going out of my mind. The whole family is worried sick. You vanished from the hospital, hide here like I'm some kind of threat." The concern sounded rehearsed, the same tone he'd used at the front desk days earlier. I reached for the folder Mr. Russell had couriered over at dawn, the one with fresh printouts, and slid it across the counter toward him. Pages spilled out, highlighted timestamps, transaction IDs, all 3 attempts to liquidate $2.8 million from the trust queued while I was still listed as comatose. "Worried about me," I said quietly. "Or worried because without my approval, you can't touch a cent." He froze for a heartbeat, eyes flicking to the papers, color draining from his cheeks. Then he shoved them back at me. "This is a misunderstanding. I was securing the fund's high-yield options to grow what Mom and Dad left us. You were out of commission. Someone had to step up." I met his gaze without flinching. "Step up? Or pay off the bookies who've been calling you at dawn?" His jaw clenched. He leaned in, voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You really think you're untouchable?" "The crash messed with your head, everyone saw the footage." "I'll file in family court tomorrow. Get a neurologist to testify you're unfit to manage anything. Once I'm guardian, the trust belongs to me. You won't have a say." The words hung heavy between us, the final thread of any pretense snapping. Zoe moved silently to the door phone already in hand, thumb hovering over emergency. I stood up slowly, walking around the island until we were inches apart. "Get out, Logan. Right now. From this second on, I don't have a brother anymore." The sentence landed like a door slamming shut. His eyes widened, shock, then raw anger twisting his features. No one had ever cut him off like that, not in our family, not in his entire life. He stared at me for a long beat, searching for the old Riley who would apologize, smooth things over, keep the peace at any cost. She wasn't there. He snatched his keys from the counter, muttered curses under his breath about how I'd pay for this, and stormed out. The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the windows. Silence rushed back in thick and final. Zoe exhaled shakily, but I just stood there staring at the empty doorway. When those words left my mouth, something deep inside cracked and fell away, a fragile part that had spent years pretending family bonds were unbreakable, that blood meant safety. It died in that instant. But in the hollow space it left behind came something new, quiet, cold resolve. Maybe that's when I truly started living on my own terms. And anyone who's ever had to draw that line with their own flesh and blood, just to keep breathing, knows the exact weight of the silence that follows the door closing for good. That afternoon, my phone lit up like it was on fire, notifications flooding in from family groups, LinkedIn, even old neighborhood chats. I tapped the first alert, and there was Logan live streaming from the living room of our childhood home. He sat in Dad's worn leather chair, sleeves rolled up, looking every bit the grieving brother. The view count was climbing fast, thousands already watching. "Riley's not herself anymore," he said, voice thick with emotion he'd practiced. "The crash did serious damage to her brain. She's paranoid, convinced we're all against her. She's cut herself off with people who are taking advantage, trying to get their hands on the family assets." He rubbed his eyes, holding up a tissue for the camera. "I'm just trying to protect her. She needs help, real medical help, before this gets worse. If anyone knows how to reach her, please tell her I'm here." Comments poured in, hearts for Logan, worried emojis, people calling me ungrateful or delusional. The algorithm loved it. Shares multiplied by the minute. My business line rang almost immediately. It was the senior loan officer I'd worked with for years. "Riley, we've seen the video circulating. The board has concerns about your current capacity. We're declining the emergency bridge loan of $800,000. Risk assessment came back too high." He sounded apologetic, but the decision was final. I thanked him quietly and ended the call. The apartment suddenly felt too small. Zoe had been watching the same stream on her tablet beside me. When the line went dead, she set the device down, hard, eyes brimming. She crossed the room in 3 steps and wrapped her arms around me tight. Tears came fast, hot, silent sobs against my shoulder. "He's destroying everything you built," she whispered. "How can he lie like that?" To everyone, I held her back, feeling her tremble, but my breathing stayed even. The loss hit hard. $800,000 wasn't pocket change. It was supposed to cover lawyers, specialists, the gap until I could regain control, but it paled next to watching trust crumble from people who once respected me. Yet the anger didn't swallow me whole. Instead, it sharpened everything. I eased Zoe back, gently met her tear-streaked eyes. "We need real proof," I said. "Not online fights, not sympathy. Something they can't spin or delete." She wiped her cheeks, nodded fiercely, already reaching for a tissue box. The live stream droned on in the background. Logan still talking about doing what's best for his sister, but I reached over and muted it. The silence that followed felt like breathing room. Losing money hurt, sure, but watching belief in me vanish from strangers and colleagues cut deeper. In that precise instant, with Zoe's tears still damp on my sleeve, I realized something unbreakable. Money comes and goes, reputations can be rebuilt, but the truth has its own momentum. It rises no matter how hard someone tries to bury it. And often the first spark comes from the quiet loyalty of the friend who cries with you instead of turning away. 2 nights later, Mr. Russell had the tow records traced. The wreck had been hauled straight to a shady scrapyard on Buffalo's industrial fringe, far from any official impound lot. We headed out after midnight, and Zoe's Jeep headlights dimmed for the final stretch to avoid drawing eyes. The yard sprawled under harsh yellow floodlights. A graveyard of crumpled frames and shattered glass snow drifted against twisted hoods. We parked behind a chain-link fence, squeezed through a gap Mr. Russell had spotted on satellite maps, and crept between the rows of Rex boots sinking into icy gravel. The air bit sharp with diesel and frost. We hunted silently until Zoe's flashlight caught the black paint of my SUV front end smashed inward roof, partially collapsed, parked dangerously close to the massive hydraulic crusher that rumbled faintly in the distance, scheduled to run at midnight. We hurried over. Mr. Russell knelt first, directing his light under the chassis while Zoe kept lookout, scanning for movement. I crouched beside the front wheel well, heart already racing from the cold and the risk. Then a deep, guttural growl rolled out from the shadows, low and menacing. A guard dog chain clinking as it lunged toward our noise. Flashlight beams sliced across the yard, seconds later sweeping fast. "Who's there?" a rough voice shouted. Zoe froze. Mr. Russell snapped his light off. We dropped flat behind a pile of rusted axles. The dog barked louder, chain rattling violently, paws scraping metal as it strained closer. The guard's boots crunched nearer, slow, deliberate. I scrambled backward on elbows and knees until my back hit the open door of a nearby sedan wreck. I slid inside without a sound, pulling the door almost closed, curling tight against the cracked dashboard. My pulse hammered in my ears loud enough I feared it would give me away. The dog circled, snarls echoing off the Hulk's flashlight beam dancing over the hood above me. The guard paused, muttered "damn strays," then kept walking, footsteps fading gradually. The barking eased. I waited another full minute before easing out, legs numb from the cold metal floor. Mr. Russell and Zoe were back at the SUV. I rejoined them, hands shaking as I aimed my own light at the brake assembly. The rubber line wasn't frayed from wear or pressure failure. It had a single deliberate incision, clean knife cut, halfway through, angled just right to hold under normal braking, but rupture hard on that sharp curve. No accident. No coincidence. Mr. Russell documented it with photos, then snipped the compromised section with cutters and sealed it in an evidence bag. Zoe exhaled sharply. I stared at the sliced hose edges still fresh under the light. "He made sure I would die," I whispered, the words tasting like ice and iron. The evidence lay right there, unmistakable, brutal, impossible to deny. In that frozen yard, surrounded by the remains of other people's disasters, the final veil tore away completely. Proof doesn't argue or excuse itself. It simply exists, waiting for the moment you're strong enough to face it. And I couldn't stop wondering what anyone would do next if they uncovered something so cold and final, proving the person they grew up with had chosen their death. The Buffalo Real Estate Charity Gala loomed just days away, the annual power event where deals were sealed over champagne and black ties held in the glittering ballroom of the Grand Hotel downtown. Mr. Russell and I worked quietly in Zoe's apartment, cross-checking the attendee list, securing my spot through a discreet sponsor, and confirming Mr. Edward Barnes would deliver the opening remarks. I chose a sleek charcoal dress, high collar to conceal the last faint scars, sleeves long enough to hide the lingering bruises, nothing ostentatious, just enough to walk through those doors looking composed and in control. Logan, meanwhile, was accelerating his endgame. He'd been making the rounds at upscale bars and private clubs, always with Samantha trailing close behind. In the photos that popped up on industry feeds, she appeared polished, tailored blazer, perfect smile, but her posture was stiff, eyes darting like she expected trouble. By midweek, he'd arranged 3 high-stakes meetings with private lenders who controlled capital for waterfront developments along the lakes. The ask was direct, $1.5 million in short-term financing to safeguard the family trust during Riley's recovery. He framed it as temporary, noble, even stepping in while his sister was medically compromised. Samantha was essential to the pitch. As a blood relative with no public red flags, her signature lent credibility. They met the first lender at a dimly lit steakhouse overlooking the harbor. Logan sat forward, elbows on the table, voice smooth and measured. "The estate needs liquidity now. Riley's condition is unpredictable. Doctors are cautious about her judgment. Samantha can co-sign as co-trustee if needed. We're talking $1.5 million to bridge the gap, fully secured by the properties." The lender listened, asked for updated valuations. Samantha nodded along, hands folded tightly in her lap, contributing only quiet affirmatives. The meeting wrapped with handshakes and promises to review documents. Outside, under the cold glow of parking lot lights, Logan stopped Samantha before she reached her car. He turned to face her, expression shifting from charming to steel. "You were solid in there," he said. "Keep that energy at the gala. Nod, smile, back me up when I speak." Samantha hesitated, breath visible in the chill. "Logan, what if she actually shows? What if the doctors were wrong?" His eyes narrowed. He stepped in, close voice, low and cutting. "If you don't help me, I'll drag you down right alongside. I'll tell the whole room you knew about the breaks, that you were in on it from the start. Your reputation, your job, your connections gone. Don't make me prove how far I'll go." Samantha's face paled. She took an involuntary step back, hands rising slightly as if to ward him off, fingers trembling. Fear flashed raw across her features. No anger, no defiance, just pure sinking dread. She stared at him for a long second, lips parted, but no words coming out. Logan adjusted his cufflinks, checked the time on his watch. "Gala's Saturday. Be there early. Dress sharp." He turned and walked to his car without looking back, leaving her standing alone in the empty lot, wind whipping her coat around her legs. She stayed motionless for several beats, then slowly walked to her own vehicle, shoulders rounded, head down. I closed the encrypted file Mr. Russell had sent, surveillance stills from the steakhouse lot, and felt the air shift in the room. Logan wasn't begging for help anymore. He was forcing it, turning allies into hostages. Samantha's terror was unmistakable, now visible in the way she shrank from him, and it meant his control was starting to fray at the edges. The gala would be the breaking point. Saturday night, the Grand Hotel ballroom glowed under massive crystal chandeliers, the air thick with perfumed cigar smoke and the low buzz of high-stakes small talk. I stepped through the entrance in the charcoal gown, chin up, shoulders back, every deliberate step echoing slightly on the polished marble. The room noticed immediately. Conversations faltered, heads turned, eyes widened. The same crowd that had flooded Logan's livestream with sympathy now stared in stunned silence, unsure which version of the story to believe. I met their gazes, calmly offering small nods to familiar developers and lenders, refusing to shrink under the scrutiny. Logan stood near the bar in a sharp black tux, mid-laugh, with a group of investors, Samantha at his side like a shadow. He caught sight of me across the sea of gowns and suits. His laugh died instantly, glass freezing halfway to his mouth. The color drained from his face so fast it looked painful. Samantha followed his stare, her clutch slipping slightly in her grip. The jazz quartet shifted into a slower number as Mr. Edward Barnes ascended the stage for his keynote. The room quieted almost at once. He adjusted the microphone, silver hair gleaming under the lights, voice carrying with the authority of decades in the business. "This industry thrives on integrity and legacy," he began. "Tonight we honor those who uphold both. Riley Crawford has demonstrated unwavering competence in managing her family's estate. Claims questioning her capacity are unfounded and self-serving. Logan Crawford holds no legal standing here, none whatsoever." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the crowd. Logan's glass slipped from numb fingers, shattering on the floor in a spray of crystal and champagne. Faces pivoted toward him, partners he'd courted for months, lenders he'd promised returns to, all retreating, a subtle half-step, expressions hardening from neutral to openly wary. Samantha stood frozen beside him, breathing, shallow eyes darting between Logan and the stage. Then she moved. Without hesitation, she walked toward the podium, heels clicking crisply on marble. The room hushed further, every eye tracking her. She reached Mr. Barnes, took the microphone with hands that barely shook, and faced the crowd. "I need to speak," she said, voice starting unsteady, but gaining strength. "I helped my cousin Logan because he convinced me it was for the family. I believed the lies. But I know the truth now. He intentionally caused Riley's accident to seize control of the money. He threatened to destroy me if I didn't stay quiet. I won't carry that anymore." A wave of gasps swept the ballroom. Logan staggered backward, mouth working soundlessly, face ashen. Samantha turned toward me, eyes shining with something between regret and resolve. She descended the stage and crossed the floor straight to where I stood. The crowd parted silently. She stopped beside me, shoulder brushing mine in quiet solidarity. "I'm sorry it took so long," she whispered. Logan looked around wildly. No one would meet his eyes. Conversations resumed in hushed tones that deliberately excluded him. Investors turned their backs. Partners drifted away the circle around him, shrinking until he stood isolated in the center of the glittering room, hands clenched uselessly at his sides. He scanned for an exit, then moved backing toward the doors, shoulders rounded, disappearing through them without a backward glance. Samantha remained at my side as Mr. Barnes returned to the podium, reaffirming support for the legitimate leadership of the estate and announcing future collaborations under my direction. The band played on, but the atmosphere had irrevocably shifted. In the instant Samantha chose to stand beside me, everything crystallized. Family isn't always forged in blood. Sometimes it's built by the people who step forward when it matters most, choosing what's right over what's easy. And that single act of courage can rewrite the entire story. The fallout from the gala hit like a storm that wouldn't let up. I returned to the office the following week and set the trap deliberately alarm system powered down for maintenance, but every high-definition camera still active, motion sensors silent. The company's seal, the heavy brass stamp that authorized wire transfers and contracts, sat conspicuously on my desk, illuminated by the single desk lamp I left on. Logan came at 1:17 a.m., slipping through the side entrance he knew from childhood. He moved fast and quiet, straight to the office, fingers closing around the seal with the relief of someone who'd finally found oxygen. The moment he lifted it overhead, lights blazed on. Officers emerged from the adjoining conference room, weapons holstered but hands ready. Logan spun seal tumbling from his grip to ring against the floor. "Hands up now," the lead detective ordered. He looked past them to where I stood in the hallway shadow. Recognition hit him like a punch shock, melting into pure rage. "You planned this," he snarled. I stepped forward slowly. "A brother wouldn't sabotage brakes to kill his sister for money. You built this cage yourself." He lunged once, cuffs snapping on before he could reach me. The officers read the charges calmly: burglary, attempted fraud, conspiracy, while he shouted about betrayal and family rights until his voice cracked. The trial in Buffalo courthouse unfolded in less than 3 weeks. Forensic reports on the brake line time-stamped withdrawal attempt, security footage of the theft. Samantha's sworn testimony about the threats, debt records tying him to underground lenders, all presented methodically. The jury needed only 3 hours. Guilty across the board, premeditated attempt to cause serious bodily harm, grand larceny, burglary. The judge, voice flat and final, imposed 9 years in a state maximum security facility, no parole consideration before 7 years served, emphasizing the calculated abuse of familial position. Logan sat rigid at the defense table, the charismatic mask stripped away, eyes hollow. He didn't glance my way as bailiffs escorted him out. I sold the Victorian house within a month, the sprawling place where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, now poisoned by every memory of plotting in its kitchen. A young family with 2 small children bought it, eager to repaint the walls and fill the rooms with noise. The proceeds funded a permanent scholarship endowment in our parents' names, annual grants for underprivileged students entering real estate, business ethics, or property management programs at state universities. It felt like reclaiming the legacy they'd worked for, turning it into something that built futures instead of destroying them. A plain white envelope arrived from the correctional facility 6 months later, Logan's looping handwriting on the front. I stood in my new apartment overlooking Lake Erie, fireplace flickering low, and held it over the flames. The paper curled black at the edges, then vanished into ash without ever being opened. Some messages are better left unread. One crisp spring morning, I drove to the cemetery with a bouquet of white lilies, the ground still soft from thaw. I placed the flowers at the base of the headstone and stood in the quiet sunlight. "I protected what was ours," I said softly, "and I finally set myself free." The breeze carried the words away, gently, leaving only peace behind. Blood ties don't grant anyone a free pass to betray, manipulate, or destroy. When someone chooses greed over loyalty, forgiveness isn't owed, it's dangerous. Sometimes the only way to survive, to truly live again, is to cut the connection completely, walk forward without looking back, and build a life where trust is earned instead of assumed. I chose to burn that letter without reading a single word. Certain endings are cleaner when we refuse to revisit them, and I find myself wondering, if the same envelope landed in your hands, what choice you would make to safeguard the quiet you've fought so hard to reclaim. Thank you all for taking the time to watch the video. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming videos.